Today's podcast is sponsored by Fire Facilities Incorporated, expert engineers, designers, and manufacturers of steel training towers, burn rooms, and mobile units that are all made in the USA. Welcome back to 3 Point Firefighter. Today's guest is Cameron Kiyokawa, and I met Cameron several years ago at a class. Noticed him right away, not just because he has good work ethic, because he has the most glorious mustache known to man. Now, he's trimmed it back for this, if you're watching this on YouTube, so I will post pictures, because I got pictures of me and Cameron with what can only be described as the best mustache in the United States Fire Service. So Cameron, he grew up in Hood River Valley, and he started volunteering in high school as a student. He spent 7 seasons with Oregon Department of Forestry before moving to Baker City, Oregon to take a firefighter EMT job. At this point, he's done with Baker. He's never going back to Baker City, Oregon ever again. He's moving forward to a training safety captain job at North Whidbey Fire Rescue, where he spent 12 months rebuilding the entire training division and constructing a 1,700 square foot Class A training facilities. And that's where he did the rest of his career. Oh, wait, he didn't. He did move back to Baker City, but this time as a division chief of training. Brother Cameron, good to see you again. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Man, I tell you what, I think that's cool that you went back to where you kind of, not where you got started because you were at the forestry, but let's start there. Why don't you tell me, let me back up, not there. Let's start with your current fire department. Tell me about that department and where you fit in with it.
So currently right now in Baker City, like you said, I started here on the Safer grant back in 2018. Worked into a little bit of stuff there with the EMS, got my intermediate up here, which is a special Oregon license, right underneath like a paramedic level. It's right below that. So I didn't go to school for anything, but I could do all the fun stuff like give IVs and push pain meds.
Nice.
So right now where I'm at, division chief of training it's a new role. It's kind of, all the guys I left when I went to Whidbey, they're still here. So kind of a new role for me. I'm trying to learn. It's a big role to have in the fire department, a big change for me. So,
well, yeah. Let me ask you this. I see a pattern here of training being such a big part of your career. How did that happen?
So that started back when I was volunteering. I was doing kind of the forestry stuff. 2011 worked for the state, but then also there was a time when our local volunteer academy were getting recruits out of it that maybe didn't reach the level that we wanted for their proficiency level. So me and a couple of guys that I knew that were kind of like-minded, kind of started doing our own thing. We had the instructor, and we had a schedule and a training grounds. We kind of started doing our little academy there, and then eventually it kind of grew into it. We had, I think, our first or second year, we had 35 people in an academy for volunteers, reaching, I think it was like 11 different departments or over 3 counties. So we really got into doing a lot of fun academy stuff there, and it really that's kind of what drove me. And we weren't super busy, so that was kind of how we got all of our firefighting skills and kept up on our training, was through the academy and doing these kind of off-night trainings with ourselves. And after that, I felt like at some point, maybe that's what I want to do in the end of my career, going to the training division side. I didn't realize it'd be, so early, but it's not a bad thing.
No, same thing with me. I wasn't aiming for it. It kind of fell in my lap, and I fell in love with it. You talk about you had an academy for the volunteers. So how tough is that to put on an academy when it's a volunteer academy and they have other jobs and other responsibilities? How do you even get through something like that?
Yeah, logistically, it was hard because like I said, scheduling, we had every Monday night, and then we had 1 or 2 Saturdays a month. But I think we were pretty blessed with people that wanted to be there. There wasn't like they had to be there. They wanted to be there. They definitely knew our expectations. So there was some logistical stuff. People dropped off. We had some people that had to be released from the academy. But overall, I think we were pretty blessed. And also, it helped me learn a lot about how scheduling and how to set up trainings that were exciting, keep people coming back for more. But yeah, it was a lot of learning. Those first couple of years doing our own academy, and then it kind of grew. And then as I grew also with it, so we started doing less nights, more days, more longer days to get all those volunteers in. If they can miss a Saturday, it's not good. If they miss a Thursday or Tuesday, we try to limit those. So, yeah.
Wow. So how big was the academy?
I think the first one we had was 30 to 35 people. Between now and then, they're still doing it back in Hood River. And they've between 18 to 25 people, I think, every other year, depending on what they have for people. So it's a pretty developed thing now. It's been going on for almost 10 years, I'm thinking, the way that we ran it. Because we took over for the local training association had one, and that's kind of where we were like, we wanted to part ways. And then I think 5 years ago, they kind of linked back up with the official training association that was kind of, the department sponsored one. So they really came full circle with how that's being distributed out to the people.
Okay. So after you did that, you went to the forestry service, right?
Yeah, I was kind of doing it at the same time. Forestry we'd work from June until about October. And so academy started in September. So there's a few weeks there where I was, leaving my job at forestry, going right down to academies. But then all winter the academies would go from about November time, December, until January the next year, to June the next year. So we didn't really overlap too much. So yeah, the seasonal forestry really helped me out with that coordination, I guess.
What do you think's tougher? I mean, I've got my own opinion. I've never done, wildfire firefighting, but what do you think's tougher, structural or wildfire?
It's been there's a lot of long hikes with your heavy pack on, and you just out there for, 12 to 24 hours. And somebody said we were IA on an engine. So we go out, respond immediately from the guard station to these fires. And we'd spend, easily 24 hours out there after working a full day of patrols. It's pretty arduous as far as forestry goes and forestry work went. But there's certain aspects of structural that are definitely more physically taxing in a more of an acute manner where it's, high rate and high tempo, but, you really can't beat a 4-mile hike in with a 45-pound pack on with you and your one person with you or two people with you. So,
jeez. Gee, and not a lot of water there, huh?
No, yeah, you pretty much bring a tool in, and hopefully that at some point a dozer can show up where you're at or a helicopter. But yeah, the terrain we were in was pretty good. We were out beyond the Dalles where you taught the 1403 class. That was part of where my coverage area was. So a lot of just kind of rolling hills and poison oak everywhere, and just craziness sometimes.
Oh, the Dalles was awesome, though. I tell you, anybody listen to this, they hear me say it all the time. I love the Pacific Northwest. Never wanted to go, never thought about it. And then when I got the first class out there, which my first class out there might have been you. I can't remember. It was one of the first two.
To Salem at Chemeketa Community College. Yeah, the class was Brooks.
I thought it was Brooks. That's right. I was at Corvallis and Brooks back to back. Fell in love with that area, and I've been back there many, many times. It's just a beautiful area. And every time I go out there, I'm like, wow, it's not raining. I thought it was supposed to rain all the time. And everybody says the same thing. You go back, you tell everybody it was miserable and it was raining all the time, no matter what. Yeah. You got it.
Yeah. The west side, everything west of the Dalles is always usually pretty rainy, but you get out where I'm at now in Baker, we get, a couple of rainstorms a year and snow, but in the summertime, it's, unbeatable for no humidity. It's in the mid to high, 90s most of the time. In the daytime, it's really can't beat the Eastern Oregon weather out here unless you hate snow. Then you don't want to show up.
I can do without cold.
Like the Michigan snow, but it's not fun.
Yeah, fuck snow. I have no love for snow. I'll go skiing, but even then, I'm mad at myself for being on top of. I'm supporting snow at that point, and I'm not down with that. That's the only reason I've never done cocaine is because people call it snow. That's how bad I hate snow.
That's not. I don't like it. It's not. Everything's cold and wet.
Yeah, screw that. Don't like the cold weather. I'm down with just 2 seasons. You give me a summer, you give me a spring, you can have everything else. Because fall, see, here's a tricky thing. Fall's like, I'm a whole different season. No, you're not. You're pre-winter. Yeah. And that you suck. You're pre-winter and you suck.
Yeah, and you're watching summer, all those activities slowly fade away into frozen winter time up here.
Exactly. Fall and winter is like your first wife, right? It's a lot of flash and a lot of, promises, empty promises. And then, you move on to your second wife, and that's your spring and summer. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. You could have a different opinion, but that's mine.
There's no fun here.
So let me ask you this. So what's the biggest difference when you're doing forestry and structural training? Because obviously physical fitness has to play into both, but I would say more so on the forestry side. But when you're doing training, how would you go about that? Like you probably can't be in a classroom as much as you are in structural, right?
They've actually, depending on what, like right now, the fire department, structural wise, I can assign a student to go to the FEMA online and go on an internet class and do all their wildland training on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And they get out of it and they do a field day, and they can go and make sure they know what a Pulaski looks like and how to walk in a line. So you can either go, the bare minimum for training for wildland. And that's kind of what I've always had this stigma against structure guys doing wildland. They never actually learned. They just read the book and took the test, and now they're wildland people. But really there's a lot of different classes kind of broken up, how we have different classification certifications in structure. In wildland, you can be certified in the food unit specialist, or you can be certified as the incident commander. There's 5 levels of incident commanding, and there's all kinds of different levels and the structure of things. It's old school. It's the original, NIMS was, they broke it all. Everything has a special classification and level. But for IA stuff, I was the engine boss or engine leader. And I had 2 people with me most of the time, and they were, had their 1 week of training. Kind of unique thing about where I was at, in most forestry agencies in Oregon, that if you're a professional forestry person, you go to something called guard school. That's 1 week we spend ours in Camp Baldwin, which is on Mount Hood. So you spend a week out of this Boy Scout camp, and they'd have a little outdoor classroom set up where you'd learn about different weather patterns. You learn ICS 100, and you'd go out, and then you'd go overnight. You'd be camping, and then at the end of the week, you'd have a live fire where you'd go out and dig line and hike in the woods, and they'd light up on fire. And it always rains, like really pretty terribly when we were there. But it's kind of a fun little 1 week camping trip where you're doing firefighting stuff. So I've been trying to incorporate a lot of those ideas into how I teach wildland stuff here. It's not in the classroom. Get out, get your gear on, go, we'll go dig a hand line in the woods, or go get the engine out, whatever, hands-on stuff for the wildland was always more important. But yeah, it's, the physical fitness stuff is, you talked about. There's the national, the Forest Service has a work capacity test. That's the PAC test. We have to do 45 minutes, 3 miles, and 45-pound weight vest on. And that's not too difficult for most people. But really, it's kind of the same with firefighting. Is you can pass your annual physical and keep on going, or do you want to have a fun time doing fire, or we don't want to struggle the entire time? So we'd have an hour a day to work out before our patrol day shift started. So we'd take advantage of that and go hiking, or go jogging, whatever the crews wanted to do. So
what do you mean by patrol? So you're actually physically going out on patrol?
Yep. Yeah. So our day would start with, we'd have our 1 hour PT. We'd have a morning weather briefing, kind of the shift briefing, and the dispatch would read the weather over the radio. We'd do some, station projects, clean up the guard station, sign maintenance. We'd have, the prevention signs, Smoky Bear stuff rolling out there. In the afternoons, when it was hot, we would go out to kind of our target hazard areas, so campgrounds, hunting areas, off-road parks, and we patrol for, recreationalists, maybe having campfires during burn bans and stuff like that. And that would kind of keep us out, keep us visible. The public knew we were doing, patrols. They wouldn't be doing bad stuff, hopefully, when we were out. But yeah.
Now, what about when you're going through people that are hunting? Don't they get mad at you because you're, messing up their hunting area?
Yeah, it's you have to be, use a lot of discretion on, when we're out there and disturbing people. But and a lot of times out here, the rain would start during hunting season. So now you're saying you can't have campfires. It was pouring down rain, but because the state hasn't relinquished the burn ban yet, you'd have to make contact. And that's one thing that was kind of interesting, is that we'd have people integrate. So some engine bosses were trained in what's called basic forest law through the state. And we would actually be able to write tickets to people, which was kind of scary because they knew that we can do that. But most of us, we're pretty reasonable when it came to ticket writing, because it's a lot of paperwork, and it was more of like hey, if you don't put your campfire out, you're liable for all the firefighting costs that are occurred with this, all the mumbo jumbo to keep them from just, they put up themselves instead of writing tickets.
So that's how you knew who the real firefighter dickheads were, is if they wrote you tickets.
Yeah, those guys, they must have had some power hungry moment, or they were mad. I don't know. It was so much paperwork to go through, because it's like writing a real ticket. You have to show up to court and everything. So it's not remotely worth it to write a ticket. But and that was the kind of the message always, it's about prevention, not about enforcement. So my secret was always to walk up, the kids would come to the campground, warm up, and begin Smoky Bear stuff and say, "Oh, mom and dad are having a fire. Smoky wouldn't want that." But the kids would actually tell them their parents that they're having a fire, and we would be like, Smokey doesn't want this. And that was kind of what I had to do, is pit the kids on them. So
Smokey will come into your trailer at night and kill your family.
Yeah. Smokey's gonna be real angry. So
Smokey hasn't eaten in weeks. You look delicious. Now, what about when we talk about forestry stuff? So I've been out there a bunch of times, and I'm always amazed at how different rigs are set up and how people talk. And let me explain. So if you look in the back of my SUV, there's turnout gear and stuff like that, stuff for arson. But when I look in buggies out there, out west, they all have their own pack, and they have their firefighting gear, like right next to their structural gear. So they got like, I don't know, it's just something I'm not used to. And then the way they talk about, we got to go out there for 2 weeks. We usually go out for 2 weeks at a time. And, the department can actually make money by using, sending their people and their equipment out there. They make quite a bit of money, and then the people make overtime. So it's just a whole different vibe out there. So I take it's the same way with you all.
For who?
For you all, that you, where you're at, don't you still have to do all that?
Yeah. So it's kind of divided into two different pieces with wildland. One, there's the initial attack. So that's if there's a fire in the city, in Baker City, that we have to go to, or mutual aid. That's neighboring department. We'll go out there with our we have a Type 3. It's like a California style engine, the big brush truck engine. We'll take that out there and help them out for free. But also the state fire marshal's office kind of coordinates structure resources. So that's probably the ones you're talking to with the Type 1 structure engines, and they're up for 2 weeks. So that's kind of the west side guys. They aren't as busy. They have a lower risk level for wildland than we do. So not too many, conflagration fires in the city of Portland usually, hopefully. So they can get their resources, send them out to, where Eastern Central Oregon for 2 weeks, where our staffing is a little lower. We have a little more risk out here. So we usually keep all of our rigs kind of, in the city until we get to absolute critical need for everywhere else. Then we might be able to free one up. But and the money making side is huge. They get paid what's called portal to portal. So they get paid from the minute they leave the station until the minute they get back. So they're getting paid the entire time they're out.
Wow.
They also get paid their backfill. So if you send out crew of 4 from the station, then 4 guys to come back in on overtime. The state will actually pay for the overtime people that come back in. So you're actually making a pretty good amount of money and getting some guys some pretty good paychecks after they're done. So.
Wow. And that's something you can pretty much expect every year, right?
Yeah. And now it's in the last few years, especially, I've noticed that we're getting more and more task force out of the big cities. They're mobilizing a lot more task forces than I was ever used to when I was doing forestry. We would see a handful of them for the big fires, but now they're getting called earlier, more, and with more people. So we have, which is helping, but there's a lot of logistics in place that have to go before you just roll in 100 firefighters and 15 engines. So.
And what about these smoke jumpers I hear so much about? Did you ever do anything like that?
No, I did not. Forestry department, so Forest Service does a lot of smoke jumpers. So that's, and state, we had the helitac crew. So that's the guys that run the helicopter. They get dropped off and then they get picked up at nighttime because you can't fly helicopters at night here. So I never did that. I was on the engine the whole time. I felt like the engine life was, we did all the IA. So every time there's a fire, we would respond just like the fire department would. And we keep the fires, our goal was to keep it under 1/10 of an acre. That was our goal. We'd have a couple that would get away, obviously, but we'd have 20 to 30 fires a year, depending on the size and where they're at. But it was more exciting. When I say smoke jumping would be fun, except for once you get land on the ground, all you're going to be doing is still hiking and digging.
Right.
So it's just a fun airplane ride to get there.
Well, plus you got to fly, and I cannot stand to fly. It's the worst. No one should do it. I'm totally against flying. I do it because I have to, but
I agree. Airplanes they're kind of sketch.
They're very sketch. They're very sketch.
The guy with the report, with the clipboard, like, yeah, that rivet looks good. Like, is he really checking that? I don't know.
Yeah, and then what if the pilot found out right before we get on the plane that his wife's cheating on him with his brother?
Yeah, you would be a victim of that whole thing.
Oh yeah, so you're right there.
You can't do anything. You're sitting in those seatbelts on your tray table. That's all you get.
That's it. You die with little shitty ass cookies and a little small thing of Dasani water, all because that guy could not satisfy his wife in bed. Yeah, it's not right. It's not fair. I ain't for it.
Exactly. Exactly.
I do hate flying. And then you got to jump out of the airplane, which sucks. And then, I mean, you pretty much have to do your job to get back. right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like, well, we'll just do a shitty job and let everything burn up. You're right in the middle of it.
Yeah. You pretty much have to, yeah. And they'll be out there. Those guys can be out there by themselves. They're 10, 20 person crew. Once they finally meet together, they're all released randomly out in the woods. And then they all meet together. They might have to be out there, several shifts without any supports. They might have to land with all their equipment and might have to get dropped in, food or whatever they'll be out there for a few days and then hike back out that's something that's pretty standard. It's called spiking out, where you're just kind of hanging out in the woods and it's whatever you brought is what you get.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, those guys are pretty tough though. They have much, them and hot shots and hell attack. They'll have, there's the work capacity test, so the pack test, but then, a crew might say, well, you passed the pack test, but you need to now pass the smoke jumper. We have our own test that we want to put on to make sure that our new guys are up to the challenge or whatever it might be. That's kind of like a crew centric idea that we require more than the standard. And that's, especially jumpers and hot shots. Those guys are known for how those hot shot guys can just walk forever.
If that's my wife, tell her I'm not here.
No, in my office, my house doesn't have very good internet service. So.
Oh, well, tell us about the hot shots.
What's that?
Tell us about hot shots.
Yeah, hot shots. They travel around. That's a very traditional Forest Service crew, but they're usually they're kind of the cream of the crop. They very physically inclined, very smart, very well put together crews. 20 guys travel around in buggies. Now they're getting side by sides, but they're if you have steep mountainous terrain, those are the guys you see like in the movies. Okay, phone, that's enough. Those are the guys those are the kind of the field team guys of forestry. Those are the guys that you get a hot shot crew, and they're independent. And they very, very knowledgeable. Those are guys that come back year after year after year. They'll spend careers in doing in forestry doing that. So yeah, they pretty much dig line and light stuff on fire. That's what they'll spend the night shift making a big line around an area. Then the daytime, kind of in the early morning, late evening, they'll light it all off on fire. That's kind of what they've been doing. Is those are the guys you want on your line.
So they're basically arsonists.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, kind of like you taught me to be in Brooks in the class. We're kind of they learn a lot about firing techniques, and that's same thing with us. You got to be
a good arsonist to be a good firefighter.
Yeah,
that's just science. I don't care who you are. You just got to go that way.
Yeah.
So you're now the training chief of Baker, right? Where we started out originally as a firefighter EMT. So what is so you Monday to Friday, or you shift work or?
Yeah, so we started off when I got here, we did a quick restructure because they found value in having the operations chief, the training chief, and the EMS chief on during the week to go to meetings and to schedule and to be here to see all three shifts. But obviously, like you might be reading, there is some staffing issues, especially out in some of these states that have the mandates. And so I move over to a shift right now temporarily until we can get back to a full crew and everything kind of settles down. So just kind of nice. I like running shifts. It's pretty fun. I'm integrating with the crew a little more, taking the ambulance a couple more times than I usually would during the day. But that was kind of the point, was for me to be here. So when every shift comes on, I plan the training for the day and I can actually be there to either coordinate it, teach it, or be part of it. And that was the idea. And so at some point we'll get back to that.
Oh, cool. So are they having vaccine mandates there?
Yeah, we're doing pretty good here for our department. They have the exception rules. So if you sign a medical exception, then you have to have a bunch of different things in place to have these. You've probably heard about some other cities in the state, in Washington, Oregon, that have been letting people go, or they've been having these strict mandate rules, or there's a bunch of different things that departments can do, but it's just a lot of hoops, a lot of logistics, a lot of coordinating, a lot of stuff.
Now in Seattle, it's like 160 people quit.
Yeah, wow. It's pretty gross.
That's terrible. I hate to see a brother or sister not doing the job they love for something like that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder about it because I wanted to talk to somebody. I got a hold of a friend of mine and to talk to somebody that has recently quit over a mandate in Seattle. And he's like, well, it might be a little too soon for that, because I'm really interested in talking to somebody about it, because I'm lacking some understanding, because if you get everything from social media and the news, you're really not getting the whole story. I'd like to hear it straight from somebody, because my concern is, or not my concern. So if you have to get certain vaccines to get the job, I wonder why they're so upset about getting the vaccine to keep the job.
Yeah.
And I'm not picking a side. I truly want to ask. I truly want to know what is, what is it about this particular vaccine? I would assume it's that it was developed quickly, or I assume, they don't like being forced to do it. I can understand all that stuff, but I'm just interested about that.
It is interesting, because that's what we had an EMT class going on. They have to provide all their immunizations for their whole life that were required. And then we have to ask this one. I said, I didn't do that. So what makes it, and that's a good point that I think some people really haven't thought a whole lot about too much, but I can't pick sides from where I'm at either. So
no. And
the best.
I'm not bashing on anybody. I just think that I'm lacking understanding, and anymore, you can't get any real news anymore unless you talk to somebody directly. And that's kind of what I'm wondering. I foresee it rolling on this way, and I'm in Indiana. I can see it moving across the United States, forcing, these vaccine mandates. But like you said, there's exemptions, right? I mean, people can take religious exemptions or whatever. And then I don't know. I got the vaccine, but
yeah. It's the exception things are weird in Oregon, because they want you to have kind of a pathway to make sure that these people that are unvaccinated are, not going to hurt anybody else being unvaccinated, but they don't provide any information on what those rules or pathway have to look like. So you have to submit a plan. The state evaluated and said, yeah, it's a good plan or bad plan, and then you're okay to proceed. So it's been pretty murky here, and unfortunately, being on the eastern side of the state, we're, traditionally, we might have differing views than people that live on the west side of the state. So we're always worried that we're going to be the first ones to get checked on and picked on by them, because we're the opponents for so long. It'll be fine, I think. I'm hoping. So
yeah, I hate to see it though. I hate to see people make those decisions. And I know I got a friend of mine I work with at the fire department, and he was not going to get the vaccine, but he's also in the military, in the Guard, and he's like, he got it because they forced him to.
Yeah.
He said, I'm not going to let 23 years of the military service go down the drain just because of a vaccine. So that's why he got his, is because he wanted to stay in,
Yeah.
So I hate to see anybody have to make those kind of decisions. There's always a perspective on one side that maybe you're not seeing,
Yeah. It's, I can see every day, you see more and more people lose, understaffed engines or non-staffed stations and all this different. And that's hard to see that, because our call volume is not going down, but we're having less people and less engines, and now it's affecting the rest of the crews. And it's not, it's nobody's fault, I guess, really, but it's hard to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you started creating training props, right?
Well, yeah,
doors.
I don't create them. I copied something. It's like we couldn't afford to buy one, so he's copied it. Now it's kind of grown from there.
Now, are you making them to sell now, or are you making them just still for your department?
So I started off. There's a class taught by a pretty well-known training company out here in the Northwest. They went to one of their classes for basic irons and did 10 hours of breaking down doors, which is something I love to do.
Mm-hmm.
We never once had a good actual prop that we used from all my academies and all my trainings. So I went out, took a tape measure out there, and I figured I could probably make this from learn how to weld in my orchard, where I learned how to weld. So I'm a farm mechanic of sorts. So we couldn't afford to buy the door at the time. The fire department couldn't buy the door, so I just made one. And then ever since then, the next department over is like, hey, you made this training prop, can you make us one? And I'm like, yeah, if you give me enough money to cover the cost of steel and a little bit of consumable labor time, then I'll make you one. So it's just kind of progressed from that. Just word of mouth. People see that I built one like at Whidbey, was where I was at, and I had one there, and people saw that and got interested and when they were asking a bunch of questions about how much it costs or how long it takes and all these different things. It's pretty much just grown from my desire to build people to provide training to themselves when they can't afford it. Not everybody can afford a $10,000 door or a $5,000 door or whatever. But my goal is always like, why is the people that can't afford these things not allowed to do the training?
Right.
That was my biggest complaint. So I don't, when I build these doors, I don't make very much profit, if at all. It's pretty much I take how much metal it cost me, how much diesel it's going to take on my pickup to where to drop it off, and a couple $100 for my time, and that's pretty much how I sell those things, I guess.
That's pretty nice. How long does it take you to build a door from start to finish?
Really, as long as I make my list of what I need to purchase from the metal shop, and I don't get too distracted by other projects, I don't screw up too bad. It usually takes me about 2 or 3 days. It's not a very long process.
Oh, really?
But also, like, every door has been a little different, so I'm kind of trying to tweak and modify and improve as I build them. So sometimes I don't improve them. I'm gonna have to go back and chop stuff off and redo it. But it takes, depends if I have 3 solid days, I can probably get one done. But that's what I'm doing right now. It takes me a long because I'm working here and doing EMS training and then coming in for calls or whatever I'm doing. It takes, probably 25 hours or so, maybe.
Oh, really? So is it just you building these?
Yeah. I have. It's kind of just little process here and there, and it's maybe will help me before, just grinding or painting. But right now where I'm at, it's just easier to just put myself out there.
So what do you call them? Kiyokawa doors?
I don't have a name for them because then the IRS can't find me. It's actually not true. I did get got an extra little bit of tax because if I sell to a government organization, I fill out a non-employee compensation form. So then it's tracked. So when I went to Washington, they tracked me out there. The H&R block said, "What are these forms?" I'm like, "I don't know." And then I get like, "Oh, you'll actually owe an extra $2,000 of Oregon tax." I'm like, "Okay."
They got you.
Or the H&R block saved me last year. But yeah, it's I make the joke about it's my clandestine business because I don't have it. It's not a real business, but the taxes, all the money shows up there anyways. It's interesting how that works, how they're trying to milk that turnip to get the money out of me. So,
do you have all the cool attachments on the door, like for chain, like cutting chains and cutting rebar and all that stuff on the side, or is it straight?
I put that stuff as it's pretty much where the customer, one person I'm building one for right now wanted to do a cut station, and they wanted the door itself, which is inward outward swinging. They also wanted so I did that, but I also make so how I make the cut profit is take a gate valve, a galvanized gate valve that's like 1.5 inches, so I can shove rebar through there. And I usually attach that to something that's not on the door because it's so loud. But I want to do training. I don't want people trying to force the door while someone's running a demo saw next to their leg. So I always have it's attachable, but also you can have it on there if you want. So all kinds of whatever people want to see, I can make it happen usually, hopefully, to try to make it happen.
So are you a shitty welder?
I'm a good grinder.
Yeah, good grinder.
That was always the joke.
Shitty welder, good grinder?
Welder, here, grind. You can't be both. I know I do pretty good. I've never been to school for it, but I took a couple classes in high school, and like I said, on the farm, I just welded all of them back together again. So
yeah,
just kind of morphed into a thing. So they can look clean. If I don't, they'll grind them off. They don't look cool.
So how many of these doors have you built so far?
This is number 8.
Number 8. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that's what caught me on Facebook. I was watching you build some of these doors. I was like, man, I want to talk to you about that. And then, of course, I remember you from class as well. That's pretty cool, man. That's cool.
One of the cool things I do. So I have to put it on the social media. It's one of the cool thing I'm doing. So that's why they're on there. They're prettier than what I'm looking like. So
I had a friend of mine that I work with. He made his own door, and I don't know how it took him a while. It's a pretty nice door. Don't get me wrong, not to sell. And honestly, not even for our department, I think just for him. But I said, dude, when I saw this door and it was all painted up and has all these attachments, I said, man, you could make so much money selling these. He goes, dude, it took me so long to make this door. He goes, my wife's mad at me because I'm always out in the garage. It takes forever. I'm always going back and forth. He's like, unless you have a team of people, you just can't make it happen. But now I can tell him, bullshit. I talked to Cameron and he does it by himself in 25 hours.
Yeah, I got it down pretty good. They're very simple though. My doors, I've seen some that you can change left or right hand. I just keep mine on one side. You can do inward outward from the same side. Some people have, different things they can add on or off. Mine are pretty straightforward. Like I said, they're not the $10,000 door. They're generally a lot cheaper than that people can afford. So I don't have a lot of extra. They don't really want a lot of extras on there. They want something they can get, they pay for. One thing I did was really fun. I enjoyed personally. We had a grant for a high school program down in Salem area where we taught the class, and they had $2,000 and they wanted to buy some training because it was a high school grant. They want to do something they can, something for their little high school program. So I said, for $2,000, I'll get you a door, set of irons, And so whatever I built on there, it was directly, you know, that financial space. That was kind of a good thing that I've always enjoyed doing, because it was like, it was giving back to somebody. That's kind of why I started doing it. You kind of gave back to these little agencies that probably couldn't get that without that. So,
wow. Well, that's a neat little market to be in, is something that doesn't cost $10,000, gets the job done, and then it's scalable for the customer. You know, I want all the bells and whistles, or no, I just want a door I can practice my technique on. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, do you have a website or anything, or do you just all word of mouth?
Everything I've done has been just kind of word of mouth, or people have, like the Whidbey one, people just came by to the training facility and they seen that, who built that? Like, oh, I built that. And they had questions, and kind of just spread out a little bit from there. But yeah, I don't, you know, it's not an official thing. It's not something I'm like advertising for, but I've had a handful of people in the last few years, like, you know, put me up on Facebook or something, like, hey, you want to sell these? Can you make me one, or need a quote? That's kind of how I get that stuff out. I'm trying to build. I'm not very good at computers, so I can't get the CAD design thing, but like to get measurements. If somebody at home has a welder and a grinder and a very little amount of actual skill, I can't measure very good. All my measurements, I don't know that line to cut on, but that's why I can never be a professional welder if I'm not great at measuring. They all come out straight. Anyways, the blueprints online, so they guys build their own.
Right.
That's one that I couldn't find. I Googled everyone. I tried to find schematics. I just actually went out and took a tape measure to the one I used. I was like, well, this is this height, and I kind of just made up the rest of it, and it all comes out pretty square. So
that's pretty neat, man. That's really neat. What are you gonna get? Any other props you're looking at building, or?
I've worked a little bit working on like a forced entry sled. Can't use the actual brand name because that'd be a copyright thing. But, you know, just what have I built? You know, I built a lot of stuff for the our physical agility testing at Whidbey. I built, you know, push pro simulator. I built a bunch of stuff like that. But I think my biggest one was when I was building the training facility up at Whidbey. Built that. That was kind of a big prop. But a lot of it's just little stuff here and there that I try to replicate. But there's a lot of cool stuff out there right now on the internet. People are making all kinds of crazy stuff. I think it's really cool that we're, you know, in the fire service, kind of what we've always done is build and make anything happen out of very little stuff. So
yeah, I try to get on the internet and look for stuff like that, but I always end up on Pornhub looking up, you know, clown stuff. That's on me. That's a weakness I got to deal with. It's not really a weakness. I'm pretty good at getting around Pornhub. I'll tell you that right now. I think I got a secret menu. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. And no, I'm not cutting that part out.
It's a fun podcast.
It is. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, brother, what else? Tell me something else. What else are we going to talk about? We covered vaccines. We covered forcible entry props, forestry. We've covered it all. What else is there?
Covered a lot of stuff. Personally, for me right now, when I'm looking through the Facebook, you know, there's a couple of different you know, officer leadership sites. You know, as a young new chief, that there's a lot of people out there that want to offer help, and I'm really happy that those guys are out there. You know, whether it be leadership, whether it be being a chief officer, whether it be just training officer stuff, and that's one thing I'm pretty fortunate that I've got enough knowledge connections, and I can navigate Facebook well enough that. That's probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my career is been sat in this office. But also it's pretty rewarding. I think that's one thing that I'm looking at other training chiefs, you know, that might someday be helping me get through certain problems. And right now we're in a unprecedented time with, you know, politics and stuff. That's a whole fun gig now that I get to deal with in this current climate. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well. Yeah, the networking is great. I've heard that my whole career, but I didn't really experience it until, you know, the past 8-9 years. The networking is fantastic. It's so cool. Like if I got a friend here and say, hey man, I'm thinking about building a door. I'm like, dude, let me call Cameron. You know, let me call this guy that's on the entire other side of the country real quick and get his idea about some stuff. You know, the same with training. Everybody thinks this podcast is sponsored by the ISFSI, which it isn't, but they have a great networking thing too, where you can post on the discussion board. I just saw something the other day, and you get all these training officers giving you good information. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. I am just by design a very lazy person. You know, I love sleeping. I love naps. I told my wife, if I'm ever in a car wreck and in a coma, do not feel bad for me. I'm tickled to fucking death. I'm relaxing. Yeah. Just put Pornhub up on my cell phone and just leave me be. I'm good with that. And that's what I like about all these different things on the internet where you can get a hold of people and, just ask them, hey, how can I do this? What's a new way to come at this training? So yeah, absolutely. I agree with you totally.
Yeah. One thing that was interesting about the ISFSI class is that the chief who was the guy who kind of led and coordinated my academy when I went through in 2007, Devin Wells, who used to be the president of ISFSI. That's kind of a super small world thing, but looking through my papers and I seen him on there, and it's just kind of it's interesting on how big the fire service seems, but also that you can turn around and see somebody that from across the country you've met, and now you're, talking, whatever. It's kind of crazy how close it is.
It is. And I've always said that the fire department, the fire service in general is great. Absolutely, without a doubt. But the subculture of fire instructors is even better. When you're dealing with fire instructors, it's a much smaller group, even though, we're spread out. Instructors they're a great little it's like a hidden gem of the fire service. A lot of people don't want to be instructors. And when you find these people that are passionate about the job and, they're just like for me, the cream of the crop. I get to talk to a lot of great instructors. So that's what, I love it. Love it to death.
Yeah. That's, so I hear, if you ever come to Eastern Oregon, you probably hopefully get to Boise sometime soon, but it's where I'm at. We're pretty spread apart. And that's one thing that I'm having, that the social media and Facebook and all that stuff, that it's easy to kind of reach out to people that might have guidance, because otherwise our closest department here that's professional is 45 minutes away from us. So there's not a lot of people outside of us to talk to about these bigger picture things. So
Right. It's always neat to see how other departments do stuff. Just how they load hose sometimes, just how their tactics. I remember when I was in, I don't remember where it was now. You could see Mount Hood wherever we were at. You could see Mount Hood pretty clearly.
But in the east side,
was it the Dalles? It might have been. But anyway, their tactics were so on point. And I noticed every time they went in and put out the fire, they immediately hydraulically ventilated and all this. And they did it the exact same way, very efficiently. It's hard to describe, but you have to see it. And I finally asked the guy, I said, hey, man, every group that's going in there is doing this exact same thing, and they're doing it quickly and blah, blah. He goes, yeah, that's what we're taught. And I'll never forget. He goes, this is our approach to putting the citizens first. And I'm like, wow, that's, really impressive. This wasn't a training chief that was telling me this. It was just a regular guy that was like, oh yeah, this is how we put our citizens first. And I'm like, man, that is such a great idea, as opposed to me getting overtime or me, getting asleep in the middle of the shift or whatever. These guys are actually, they're put the walking the walk and talking the talk. It's great.
Yeah. So when I hear those voices that are kind of putting the goal of the fire service before everything else, there's a lot of people that just kind of want to get to work, kick back, hang out, but it's always refreshing, especially, where I'm at in my position. There's guys that still want to go out there and kick ass and do the job. And that kind of motivates me to keep on doing my job. And I'm like, I don't want to pander to the guys that want to ride the recliners all night, but, the guys that want to do training, want to get dirty, they want to get their stuff on and go, break shit in half. That's kind of gives me that motivation to put these good trainings on. And obviously, because we're all putting the community first, and that's always what every firefighter, chief officer, whatever, that's the only goal we have.
Yeah,
in my opinion. So
I've noticed that whole idea out there at West. I mean, it's not that I'm not seeing it other places. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it is so ingrained in the nature out there, in the culture out there, that it's like just matter of fact to them, like, oh yeah, I mean, this is community. We got to take care of our citizens. This is how we do it. I'm like, that's interesting. I really like that.
Yeah.
But brother, I have really, really enjoyed catching up with you again. It's been a lot of fun. I'm glad you took some time out of your day. You're obviously busy with your training job and then building stuff. I know you like to ride motorcycles and everything. So
that's a new hobby.
And you haven't wrecked yet, right?
Not yet. I hear it happens to everybody. So I'm just kind of counting down the miles until it happens.
Well, I'll tell you what, before we go, I'm going to tell you a little story.
Okay.
Here's why I am not on a motorcycle. The year is 1986. Top Gun comes out. I go see Top Gun. I've never ridden a motorcycle. And I'm like, I want a motorcycle. Maybe it's 87. Anyway, I go to Lexington, Kentucky, about 30 miles away. I go to a dealer. I'm on a Ninja 600. I'm on it. Looks good. It's making up for having a small penis. I'm like, I'm down with this. This is good. I look at the leather stuff. I look at the helmets. I'm ready to buy. My parents said I could buy it. I'm going to buy it. I'm on it. And the guy walked up to me. He goes, hey, man, is that the bike you want? Yeah. He goes, oh, you saw Top Gun, didn't you? Oh, yeah. He said, well, have you ridden a motorcycle before? I said, no, never. He goes, okay, well, I'll be glad to start the paperwork on this, but I am going to tell you within the first 6 months, you're going to crash this and you will bleed and be in pain. So let's go over to I was like, what? He goes, oh, yeah. You don't need to be on this motorcycle. He goes, you will crash it, but hey, let's go do the paperwork. And I was like, no, never mind. I never got one. I never got on a motorcycle after that. He probably saved my life, to be honest with you.
Yeah. They're pretty dangerous, but it's enjoyable. I'm out here and it's not, I don't go fast. I'm not doing the Top Gun down the airplane.
Popping a wheelie.
I was going to get a moped was my plan. I was going to get a moped. But I look silly because I'm not a small dude and I have a tiny little moped. It'd be embarrassing. So I got a bike. So I do in my off time. Try to. It's nice out.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. Again, I appreciate you being on the show, brother. And I wish you the best of luck. And thank you for giving me some of your time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right, brother. See you. Today's podcast was sponsored by Fire Facilities, designers and manufacturers of realistic, built-to-last training structures and mobile units for 30 years. Make training count. Visit firefacilities.com for more information.